to pass a massive tax cut, which will be the biggest tax cut in our country's history if it's passed the way we'd like to have it passed. It'll be the biggest tax cut in our country's history.
You know, that's the kind of stuff the markets like. That's the kind of stuff friends of the president and friends of his agenda like. Here's the kind of stuff that concerns them, though, when he gets off that message, off the market-friendly message, off the economically friendly message, off the taxpayer-friendly message, when he veers from that message. The Wall Street Journal is spelling it out today in an unusually scathing editorial entitled "The Buck Stops Everywhere Else," blaming the president for tending to blame everyone else but himself for the problems. Now, you might agree or disagree with that premise, but it is a sore point for those who love his agenda but don't love the president veering from that agenda. And they raise many examples of late. Let's go first to Blake Berman at the White House and get his take on the confusing and mixed message take that's going on right now. Hey, Blake.
Hi there, Neil. And what you have from the White House and the president on this day is trying to circle back to their top two legislative priorities, that being getting health care reform done, and then at some point after that, passing a massive tax cut. Over the past 45 minutes, hour or so to that end, the president has been meeting with top Republican leaders from both the Senate and the House. At the beginning of that meeting, the president made some very brief comments in which he talked about Obamacare, describing it as a, quote, Democrat-inflicted catastrophe. And he also said he feels that a compromise among Republicans as it relates to health care could be coming around the corner.
The Senate, I'm sure, will follow suit and get a bill across the finish line this summer that will be great health care for Americans. And I'm looking forward to seeing it, so looking forward to seeing it.
However, in the past couple days, several Republican senators like Lindsey Graham and Richard Burr have expressed doubts that a health care reform compromise could happen at some point this year. I asked the White House press secretary, Sean Spicer, about this at the briefing earlier today, and he told me he feels that Republican leadership will, quote, work their will. Neil, on the issue of tax reform, you just played a little bit of that soundbite from the president. He also said that he feels that they could get a massive tax cut done this year, but he also added the caveat, if we get what we want. Jamie Dimon on this day stressed the need for tax reform, saying, quote, the urgency of tax reform cannot be overstated, which led me to ask Spicer this question.
Where is the urgency at this point from the administration?
Well, again, that's a subject that's going to be discussed today with the leadership. We need to get this right. We need to involve stakeholders from a variety of backgrounds to make sure that we get it right, and that's what the president and his team are doing.
Neil, on the issue of tax reform here, when the White House speaks about progress, they talk about Gary Cohn, Steve Mnuchin, the top economic folks around the president, holding meetings, holding listening sessions to all the stakeholders here in Washington and around the country. They say more of those listening sessions are in the pipeline as well. Neil?
All right, Blake Berman, thank you very, very much. Now, here back again is the seminal development today where a conservative, market-friendly publication like the Wall Street Journal, part of our parent company empire, by the way, chastising the president for getting sidetracked on issues or then going after his own staff or Justice Department, you name it, for doing things that get in the way. Now, the Journal arguing that it is getting on those sidetracks, tweeting or otherwise, that hurts the president himself and the very people with whom he works. Well, obviously, it raised a lot of eyebrows today in and outside the financial community, and a sign that there might be some division in the ranks. Separately, the Washington Post had a story about a number of Republicans who said every time the president is not talking about tax cuts or reforming health care is a missed opportunity. To Mary Kissel, Wall Street Journal editorial board. Mary, there have been other moments where the Wall Street Journal has called the president to task on things that are distractions, but this was a deadly sort of an item-by-item attack on the president hurting himself. What did you make of that? What was the message in that?
I think it was a simple message, Neil, in that the president is his own worst enemy. He was elected with a huge mandate here from his conservative base to do fundamental tax reform, to do health care reform, and yet we see the same kind of undisciplined behavior that we saw on the campaign trail. Now, that might have been fine during the campaign, and the president might have said, well, that worked for me during the campaign. But now that he's president, he has to get things done. Critics out there might say, well, you know what? Healthcare reform wasn't killed by a Trump tweet. It was killed by the Republican Congress. But, you know, the president also has another function, which is to persuade the American public of his agenda. And if he can't keep on message, and if he undermines people like his attorney general, it's very hard to keep that unified message.
You know, a lot of them come back, Mary, and say, well, you know, they have not exactly made things easier for him by foisting this notion that you have to get health care done first to then go to taxes. There might be very good legislative reasons for doing so, but the president gets frustrated with that process and lashes out. But is it a mutual feeling of disappointment in each? I mean, it's not as if they both have the daggers out for each other at this point, but what are you reading?
Look, this isn't just about Donald Trump. Take, for instance, and I'll answer your question about health care, but just first take the issue of the so-called travel ban. That's an issue of executive power, Neil. That's not just about President Trump. It's about the president who comes after him and the power to control immigration. Trump tweeting that it's a ban, mischaracterizing the legislation, criticizing the attorney general for actually making it something that is, I think, more easily passable through the Supreme Court by making exceptions for, say, green card holders. That's a good thing. So for the president to undermine that is to undermine executive power, and that's
and by the way,
a greater
undermine
concern.
whatever shot he potentially could have with trying to convince members of the Supreme Court, who he now seems to be saying you're wasting your time on this politically correct version, right?
Yeah, that's right. And also look at health care reform. Obamacare never had majority support, but since the president rushed through that first bill through Congress, couldn't get his coalition together, again, making statements, not persuading, Obamacare is suddenly becoming more popular. That's crazy, given where prices are going, given the fewer number of choices that people have of doctors. So, look, he is an undisciplined man. He practices the politics of personal pique. We know that about him. But he also likes to win. And if he wants to win on these big agenda items, and somebody's going to have to take that Twitter account and have some kind of strong conversation with him.
But, you know, Mary, I don't really mind the Twitter thing as long as he stays on topic. In other words, if you were tweeting, you know, in the middle of this, dust up on whether it's tax cuts or health care through, and he's tweeting on top of that, going over the heads of the media community that might be trashing the likelihood he'll ever get that done, that reinforces a message that's positive and more popular than anything else he's been tweeting about. So why doesn't he do that?
Yeah, well, look, he did the same thing with the London Bridge terror attacks.
Right.
He came out with a terrific tweet that said, basically, Britain, we support you. And then he went after the mayor of London. Now, the mayor of London is not our favorite person on the editorial page. He's been far too soft on terror, but
Right.
It's really the place of the White House to go after him. It makes the Oval Office look small, I'm afraid.
Now, this could be a temporary thing, and as the journalist pointed out, and you've been here on multiple visits on this network and others, this notion that that agenda is a positive, economically market-helping agenda. I got the sense from the Journal today that you guys were saying in between the lines, Mr. President, you're risking your own best thing going. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that's spot on. Again, he was elected as a reform president, and he has a Republican majority for now. But time is running out, and once you get into next year, a lot of congressmen are going to be thinking about the midterm elections, and if he loses that majority in Congress, or politicians start thinking, well, you know, I got to run away from this guy because we can't trust him with the messaging or trust him to back us up, then, you know, effectively the presidency is over.
All right, we should point out that both sides have been sort of pointing the fingers at the other. Obviously, if this drags on, it's going to get more so. How do you see this playing out?
I think the best thing that this Congress could do is to just move forward, ignore what's going on in the Oval Office, ignore the smoke and mirrors of the Russia inquiry, which really, there's no there, and do what they were elected to do, put bills on his desk.
So you don't think
to
this
sign.
Comey thing, any of that goes any further? He and they should focus on the stuff that got him there.
Absolutely, and put it on his desk and give him some achievements, give him something to talk about, get his attention off Twitter.
All right, Mary, thank you very much, Mary Kissel. All right, no doubt she'll be hearing from the Never Trumpers in a matter of seconds. All right, we just relay this here because that is a big development here. Also a big development here, what's going on half a globe away. We have the third suspect named in those London attacks. Fox Business Network's Ashley Webster with what they are now learning and piecing together. Hey, Ashley.
Yeah, hey Neil. First, I just want to bring you some interesting news tonight. British Prime Minister Theresa May on the campaign trail with literally less than 2 days to go now before the election, really talking tough on how to combat these terror attacks. She says, quote, "We will rip up some human rights laws if it will help prevent these terrorist attacks." She's talking about making it easier here for authorities to deport foreign terrorist suspects back to their own countries, also to restrict the freedom of movements of terrorist suspects when there's just not enough evidence to prosecute. Some very tough talking from Theresa May. She's been under fire for the inability for the UK to stop these attacks. The intelligence services said they have managed to foil many other plots, but it's very impossible and takes a lot of resources to stop all of them. You mentioned a third suspect named today, 22-year-old Youssef Zaghba. He was known to Italian authorities. He's of Moroccan and Italian descent. Italy says it let the intelligence agencies here in the UK know about him, but the British police say they did not know about him. And then late this afternoon, or earlier this afternoon, I should say, we had a French police officer attacked by a man outside Notre Dame Cathedral in central Paris. He was attacked with a hammer. The suspect shouting, "This is for Syria." The suspect was shot in the chest, but we understand survived. And on him, they found an identity card that showed he was a student from Algeria. So certainly terror taking center stage, Neil, and the election here in the UK just about 40 hours away. Lots for voters to mull about, and of course we'll be here following it every step of the way.
All right, thank you, my friend, very much. Ashley Webster in London. In the meantime, by now you have seen pictures of this woman who the government says was a leaker. But here's what struck me, how young she is. She's 25. And I'm thinking to myself, how does she get the kind of security clearance she did in the first place to get her hands on what she allegedly did and then leak out after this? All right, I want to show you an image of a 25-year-old woman. Her name is Reality Winner. The government is now charged with leaking intelligence on Russian hacking, on a whole variety of other stuff to the media. Fox News correspondent Trace Gallagher with the latest on that and how someone so young would have the security clearance in the first place to do what she allegedly did. Hey, Trace.
Hey, Neil, the suspect, 25-year-old Reality Winner, the Department of Justice says she was arrested on Saturday, which was one day after a leaked NSA document appeared on the news website The Intercept. The document alleges that Moscow's military intelligence services tried to hack at least one U.S. voting software supplier just days before last November's election. It also accuses Russia of sending phishing emails to more than 100 U.S. election officials, though there is no evidence the alleged Russian hacks were successful. According to the FBI arrest warrant, Reality Winner was caught after investigators noticed the leaked document had been folded or creased, suggesting it had been printed out and then carried out of a secure area. Ms. Winner also had exchanged emails with the news site that published the document. When she was confronted, investigators say she admitted printing the document and was aware the information could damage the U.S. and benefit a foreign country. Now, there's no word on motive here, but Ms. Winner is an environmentalist who opposes both the Keystone and Dakota Access Pipeline. She supports Bernie Sanders and is no fan of President Trump, using hashtags like #NeverMyPresident and using expletives to describe both the president and his support for a border wall. Reality Winner is a government contractor with top secret security clearance. She was employed at a national security agency facility in Georgia where the document was leaked, and WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange has now tweeted his support for Winner, calling her courageous. Neil.
Wow. All right, Trace Gallagher. All right, so you catch the leaker, maybe you prevent future leaks. American Center for Law and Justice Chief Counsel Jay Sekulow. Jay, what do you think?
Well, I think, look, at least they got one. I mean, this is not the deep state. These are not people deep inside the agency. But this was I'm not making so light of the fact that she was 25 years old. She was mature enough to have served in the military. She speaks 5 languages, and she took top secret classified information and distribute it, which is a felony. So she should be prosecuted as she's going to be. I'm glad she was arrested. She will be prosecuted as she should be. But this points to the problem. I don't want to get lost on the fact, I know a lot of the media is talking about this, Neil, that she was only 25, as if that gives her a pass. It doesn't, because most of the young people, most of the people involved in the tech end of our national security are young. So she was responsible. She was 25. If she did this, as the allegations say, and she's convicted, she should go to jail.
You know what I did wonder about, the age notwithstanding, though, Jay, is this is very similar to the Snowden deal, where he had all these security clearances and somehow was able to get his hands on stuff. And I'm thinking to myself, how many others, regardless of their age, because it seems like a large pool of people who can get access to this stuff. And it seems like a very large pool of people.
Well, it does. It is a large pool of people. And here's the thing. She had top secret clearance. If you went to her Facebook page or social media sites, she was posting stuff that would have raised a question with an intelligence agency, I would hope, if they were evaluating her position as someone that would be handling classified information. I mean, she had, I think, a tweet exchange with Zarif over from Iran, the foreign minister. So, again, does this go back to the failure of our intelligence in the first place, and then not vetting the people properly? Remember, we used to have on the form you'd come into the United States seeking access, we would say, are you a terrorist? Have you associated with terrorists? Check yes or no. Nobody bothered to check their social media, which showed, in some of these terrorist cases, horrendous stuff that was posted, which would have been obvious. So I think, Neil, put the age aside, put everything else aside. Look at the social media, find out who these people are. 25 years old, she's accountable under the law, period.
All right. Now, you normally hope that if you catch a smaller fish, and there's no way to know that you'll catch other fish. Some of the ones and then who have been apparently leaking information of great substance, they're probably more senior. They're probably higher up. So I'm wondering whether traditionally this kind of an apprehension leads to others. What happens?
Well, look, anytime you've got a grand jury impaneled, an indictment, a conviction, or a trial, then a conviction, it sends a message. But you raised the key issue here, Neil, and that is, how do you get to the people that are deeper within the bureaucracy, deeper within the government, inside what's called the deep state? And I think there you have to take these investigations to a whole new level. This was caught because a news agency got concerned about the data. That's the only reason this was initially caught, because they could have claimed First Amendment anonymity. They did not. So that's number one. Number two, in going after those that are deeper in, what we're doing in some of the litigation we're involved in at the American Center for Law and Justice, we're filing these FOIA requests to see if we can find a common nexus of people. Not what they're saying, but is it the same group of people communicating? And we're getting very close on some issues within the State Department, where it seems to be a core group of about 20, 23 people that were, in fact, saying constantly on these email trails, and that makes you wonder. And that's not evidence of a crime, but that's how you start investigating crimes. So the FBI has to be very aggressive on this. They need to be a grand jury impaneled. Hopefully there is in Washington, and this is being evaluated at that level. That's where it needs to be.
Jay, thank you very much.
Thanks, Neil. Appreciate it.
All right. Just in case you're in that camp of people that says, all right, tax cuts are at least delayed, I want you to meet the guys leading the charge to make sure they happen, all of this noise notwithstanding. In fact, there is no one who has worked harder or as long to make sure those tax cuts become a reality than Kevin Brady, the Congress. All right, I want you to think of something. Long before Donald Trump made it to the White House, long before a lot of people were even ironing out the possibility of a tax cut, this guy was working on it. House Ways and Means Chairman Kevin Brady, who joins us from the nation's capital. Mr. Chairman, very good to have you.
Neil, thanks for having me.
Now, I know you're busy with a lot of meetings and powwows with all the White House biggies, Treasury Secretary Mnuchin, among others.
Yeah.
Where does this stand by your estimation?
Yeah, my view is, look, we're sticking to the timetable, the work product that has to be done to succeed this year in really bold tax reform. We have another meeting today with the White House principals as well as the Senate, of course, Speaker Ryan as well. Our tax teams are meeting regularly. The principals are meeting regularly. We're just focused on getting it done this year. So I think we're making good progress.
Or when you say this year, and I always pester about this, when? I mean, at first they were talking about maybe early summer. Now here we are, and then August, and then they said Labor Day. Where is this?
Yeah, so I think everyone is focused on what month we might see a draft or a bill or when this process begins. But I really think the right focus is on what year, and it's got to be this year, 2017. I think all the elements are in place to do it. I think the job creators in the country are hungry for this tax reform. I think Americans are too.
I'm sorry, Chairman. When you say this year, though, that it would happen this year, it would also be implemented this year?
Yes, sir.
All right. Would it be retroactive?
So it depends on the timing of it. I think as much as we can make immediate, the most pro-growth provisions that we accelerate, the better for the economy. And I think one thing, too, you create the certainty of low rates, of a tax code design that our businesses can compete and win anywhere in the world. And the idea that businesses can fully expense their business investment immediately, those are awfully pro-growth initiatives.
You know, Chairman, did you see, and maybe you have the Wall Street Journal did an editorial criticizing the president for these distractions and tweets, not so much the tweets themselves, but when he goes off on a tangent on subjects that have nothing to do with what presumably the markets or investors or general average Americans would like. That is those tax cuts, the health care reform, et cetera, and faulting him for getting in the way of his own good ideas and, by extension, I guess, yours. Do you agree with that?
Well, look, this is a president who wants to speak directly to the American people. He knows how to do it. It is a bit unconventional, to say the least.
But the journal is saying, in speaking to the American people, sir, what he's doing is going outside issues that have nothing to do with the more important ones at hand, like what you're working on.
Well, I think maybe that just taking that unconventional approach is what drew a lot of public support to him. As for me and on tax reform, we're laser focused on getting it done this year. The Trump team feels the same way in the Senate as well. So, look, we're just going to stay the course, you know, grind this out, work through the big problems, have a unified tax plan going forward.
All right. So, Chairman, one of the things that has been sort of hinged to is the health care reform effort. Is it your understanding now, despite the differences in the Senate, they're having a Herculean time just trying to get agreement on anything, that if they do get bogged down, you'll move on to tax cuts?
Well, I'm pretty optimistic that they will get the job done. I know it's hard in the Senate. In my view, the House delivered them a very good product. We also delivered them more resources to improve upon it. So, look, I'm anxious for them to do their work, not just on health care, but getting those $1 trillion of tax hikes out of the economy. That really clears the way. And more importantly, I think creates momentum for finishing tax reform as well. So, look, I just want them to keep doing their job. Let's deliver this to the president. And then, because we're running this parallel track on tax reform, that really frees up the field for us.
Do you think that your colleagues can come to an agreement on whether these are all paid for? There are some of the more moderate members who say they should be paid for, and that has been apparently more of a debate and a raging one in your party than was first thought to be the case.
Well, yeah, I think we can come together, and I think here we will look at the major tax reforms in history. What we know, if you're going for the greatest growth and you're going for the greatest number of years of that growth, the Reagan reforms that were bold, they were balanced within the budget, and they were permanent. I think that gives us the model we want to go for. And right now, especially since one of the big focuses is on how do we vault ourselves back in that lead pack from our global competitors, we don't simply want to stop jobs from moving overseas. We want the business decisions to bring those supply chains back. Permanence is really key to that.
All right, permanence would mean that beyond 10 years.
Yeah, that it is balanced within 10 years and beyond, and frankly, it's achievable. We just have to stay at the table, make sure it works.
All right. Meanwhile, you've got a debt limit that you're running into. Treasury Secretary Mnuchin has said just raise it, don't attach any provisos to it or conditions for it. How likely is that, do you think?
You know, and members are having discussions right now about that. Obviously, the timetable has moved up. Secretary Mnuchin said he wants this done before August, so we're having discussions with our members. I'm one of these members of Congress who would like to see significant budget reforms that go along with debt ceiling, because frankly, the budget rules we work under, are all focused on how do you spend more, not how do you create savings and efficiency.
But he's
which
saying
is
don't
what
get
we
into that
need.
kind of stuff now, the Secretary. And so are you of the opinion that you can go ahead and raise it and address these issues later, or now's the time to do it?
Well, look, we're going to listen to our members on how we get this done. I'm just one of these people who believes if we have an opportunity to change the way Washington spends and budgets in a way that works for taxpayers, insolvency, let's look for those opportunities.
Do you think there'll be a government shutdown?
No, I don't. Look, we're going to pay our debts. We're going to pay them on time. We're going to create that certainty going forward. This is a healthy discussion about, especially with $21 trillion debt on the horizon, that we have this.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much.
Thank you, Neil.
The House Ways and Means Committee Chairman, Kevin Brady. All right, more on videos that keep popping up on the internet that show, well, authorities did know about the guys behind an attack. A lot after this. What is it about these videos that just pop up on the internet? Anyway, following the latest London terror attack, a YouTube video was showing how to carry out a truck attack that was posted. Then we get separate reports about others that show the perpetrators themselves talking about what they want to do. Now, the Wall Street Journal, among others, reporting that despite being notified, YouTube did not take the video down in this particular case until the Journal reached out for comment. No comment as of yet on this development, but Fox Business's Kennedy is here, Democratic strategist Christy Setzer, and GOP strategist Gianna Caldwell. Again, we ourselves reached out to YouTube, still waiting for a response. But Gianna, one of the things we've discovered in this balance between privacy and protection, it always leans toward protection a little more the more incidents we see. Where is this going? What are YouTube's obligations?
Well, YouTube definitely should take that video down, and I think that YouTube has to be a whole lot more aggressive, Neil. But in order to understand where we are in social media today, we got to understand the history of it with terrorists. In May 2010, Osama bin Laden authored a letter directing his followers to use social media to spread terrorist propaganda as well as use it as a recruiting tool. Since then, the DOJ reported that it's one of the greatest tools to bring in young jihadists. Now, this is interesting, Neil, because this could have been prevented. John Cohen, of the former acting director of Homeland Security, Office of Intelligence, said that there was a secret rule which disallowed for those who were screening applications for visas, they couldn't use social media as one of those tools to see who had whatever up. We could have prevented a lot of this stuff, and now we're at a point where we can actually do something, and that's with the Trump administration.
You know, Kenny, the rap against doing so, even if you wanted to, is that there's so many hours that you'd have to cull through on YouTube, for example. 200 hours uploaded, a video uploaded every minute, I guess, or something incredible like that. That would be a big task.
Of course, it's a big task, and that's why these tech companies are developing algorithms at a much faster rate than intelligence agencies or law enforcement ever could. And that's why it's much better for them to operate under natural free market forces than under some centralized bureaucracy like British Prime Minister Theresa May is suggesting in essentially shutting down parts of the internet, which is absolutely impossible. It's not just terrorists who are using social media, it's pretty much everyone. It's billions of people. So although, you know, it can be very problematic, it also creates the most solutions and the easiest way to find terrorists for law enforcement and other people who want to turn in bad guys.
Sometimes, Chrissy, YouTube is the least of the issues. Some of these guys were featured, at least one of the assailants, alleged assailants, in a program about jihadists. So they're out there, but how do you find them before they do whatever they want to do?